Ethan's small spacecraft shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of ZaratH-Prime. Outside the window, jagged mountains stretched into a sky painted with two suns, and vast crimson deserts shimmered under the alien light. The planet was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its air was thin but breathable with his suit, and the gravity, though slightly stronger than Earth's, made his body feel heavier with every movement. He pressed his palms against the controls, checking the navigation systems one last time. This was supposed to be a routine scouting mission, but he already felt the weight of unseen eyes watching him. No human had ever truly explored ZaratH-Prime before. Stories of its towering predators and merciless hunters had spread through Earth's exploration guilds for decades. Ethan was small, lean, and ordinary by human standards, but he carried something far rarer: calm focus under pressure. His green eyes scanned the desolate landscape below as the spacecraft descended toward a valley filled with enormous rock formations. He knew this was where the first contact with the native species would happen. As his craft landed with a muted thud, a soundless ripple of dust rose around it. The hatch hissed open, and Ethan stepped out, feeling the alien soil crunch under his boots. He had trained for environments like this, but nothing in simulations had prepared him for the sight of the aliens waiting for him. They were immense, over 3 meters tall, with thick-scaled bodies and powerful limbs. Their faces were angular, sharp, and framed by crest-like ridges. Each movement radiated strength. The aliens' eyes glowed faintly in the sunlight, reflecting intelligence as well as suspicion. Ethan took a careful step forward, hands visible, showing he meant no harm. The aliens snorted and laughed, a sound like rocks grinding against each other. One of them, larger than the rest, stepped forward. "Look at this fragile thing," it said in a deep, rumbling voice that vibrated through the valley. "A human? Do you think such a weak creature can survive here?" Ethan's heart pounded, but he did not flinch. He knew mockery was their first weapon. He nodded politely. "I am here to explore, learn, and if possible, cooperate," he said, his voice steady. The aliens tilted their heads, curiosity mixing with their amusement. Another alien, smaller but wiry and fast, circled him. "Cooperate," it hissed. "With your kind, fragile as paper?" The creature snapped its claws in a sharp gesture as if swatting at him. Ethan instinctively stepped back, letting it pass, but he noticed something. The way they moved, the way they tested him, was almost like a game. A deadly, dangerous game, but a game nonetheless. Ethan knew the first hour was crucial. His survival depended not on strength, but on observation and understanding. He studied the aliens as they laughed and whispered among themselves. Their hierarchy was clear. The largest, strongest alien led, while the smaller ones followed, eager to see if he would fail. If he could show even a hint of competence, he might earn their respect or at least their attention. "Let us see if the human can walk among us without breaking," the largest alien growled. With that, a small group of aliens approached him. Their intent was obvious. They wanted to intimidate him, to make him stumble. Ethan held his ground. He raised his hands slowly, a universal gesture of peace, and smiled slightly. "Curiosity is not weakness," he said softly, hoping to plant the idea that strength was not only physical. The aliens paused. One of the younger ones hissed and stepped back, clearly unsettled by his calmness. The leader's eyes narrowed, but Ethan could see a flicker of interest beneath the surface. Before the aliens could decide how to respond, the ground beneath them trembled. A low rumble rolled through the valley, and dust plumes rose from the nearby cliffs. A creature emerged, a predator unlike any Ethan had ever seen. Its massive form towered above the aliens, muscles rippling beneath thick armored scales. It had 6 legs, each ending in sharp claws, and a head crowned with a series of jagged horns. Its eyes were intelligent, aware, and terrifying. The aliens froze. Some whispered warnings. Others stepped back instinctively. The leader growled, trying to assert control, but even he seemed cautious. Ethan, however, took a step forward, sensing an opportunity. The predator's attention focused on him, not the aliens. Its gaze was assessing, curious but calm, not hostile. Ethan remembered the survival guides he had studied. Apex predators respected courage, not recklessness. He stood tall, arms open slightly, and spoke in a low, steady voice. "I mean no harm. I am a traveler, and I respect this world." The predator tilted its head, and for a moment Ethan felt an odd connection, as if the creature understood him. The aliens murmured among themselves. How could this tiny human not run? How could he stand there without fear? Some of them snickered nervously, but the laughter sounded forced. Ethan took advantage of the moment. He slowly circled the predator, not threatening it, but showing he was unafraid. The predator sniffed the air around him and then, surprisingly, leaned forward, pressing its massive head gently against Ethan's shoulder. A sound like a low purr echoed from deep in its throat. The aliens gasped. Their apex predator had accepted the human in a way they had never imagined possible. Ethan froze for a moment, then relaxed, careful not to overstep. "You are different," one of the aliens whispered. The leader's eyes narrowed. "This changes nothing," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. Ethan smiled faintly, sensing the shift. Mockery was not gone, but curiosity had replaced some of the fear. Over the next few hours, Ethan observed the aliens' behavior. They were skilled hunters, experts in tracking and combat, but they had underestimated intelligence. By quietly studying their tactics, Ethan began to understand how to move among them. He avoided confrontation, but he also learned to anticipate their actions, to predict the moments when they would strike or test him. He was aware that survival meant more than just avoiding attacks. He needed to prove himself useful, clever, and capable of thinking in ways they could not. By the time the twin suns began to dip toward the horizon, Ethan had mapped the valley, noted hiding spots, and identified the social hierarchy among the aliens. The apex predator remained by his side, a silent guardian whose presence commanded respect from even the bravest hunters. As night fell, Ethan built a small camp using materials from the valley. The aliens watched from a distance, some curious, some still mocking, but none dared approach the predator. Ethan cooked a small meal, sharing nothing with the aliens or the predator yet, but he felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. He had survived the first encounter. He had entered a world of giants, and he was still standing. In the darkness, the predator lay close, its enormous eyes reflecting the starlight. Ethan spoke softly, almost to himself. "Tomorrow will be harder," he said, "but I can do this. I have to." The predator made a low, approving sound, almost as if it understood his words. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief rest, knowing that mockery was only the beginning. The aliens would test him again, harder, and he would need every ounce of his wit, courage, and intelligence. But for the first time he felt that the impossible might not be impossible after all. Among these fierce hunters, a fragile human had found his place, not by strength, but by courage and cleverness. As he drifted into sleep under the twin moons of GalacticPrime, the faint sounds of alien whispers reached him. Some spoke of fear, others of curiosity, but all of them had begun to notice one undeniable truth. Ethan was not like any human they had imagined. He was different. And different, they would soon learn, could be stronger than they ever expected. The next morning, the twin suns rose slowly over the crimson mountains of GalacticPrime. Ethan awoke to the gentle rumble of the apex predator lying beside his camp. Its massive body was a silent shield, and the faint warmth of its scales reassured him. He stretched carefully, mindful not to startle it. Survival on this planet required attention to every detail, and Ethan had learned the hard way that even small mistakes could have dangerous consequences. The alien hunters from the previous day were already moving through the valley. They watched Ethan closely, whispering among themselves. Some still laughed quietly, but others had a flicker of doubt in their eyes. The leader of the group, a towering alien named Varrock, stepped forward. His eyes, sharp and glinting, bore into Ethan's face. "Human," Varrock said, his voice low and commanding. "Today you will face a trial that only the clever and the strong survive. You will enter the Shadow Gorge and return. If you fail, your place among us will be nothing more than a lesson for others." Ethan nodded, hiding his nerves. He had anticipated this moment. The Shadow Gorge was infamous across GalacticPrime for its deadly predators, sudden rock slides, and confusing maze-like passages. Most aliens survived only because of brute strength, but Ethan relied on something else. Observation, planning, and adaptability. "I understand," he said simply. "I will return." The aliens chuckled. Some muttered that the fragile human didn't stand a chance. Ethan ignored them, focusing on the gorge ahead. He felt the presence of the apex predator beside him, and that quiet companionship gave him courage. Together they approached the mouth of the gorge. The entrance was narrow, flanked by jagged rocks. Shadows moved across the walls as small flying creatures darted in and out, their sharp claws ready to strike anything that moved carelessly. Ethan carefully adjusted his suit's sensors, scanning for heat signatures, motion, and structural weaknesses in the gorge walls. He knew the aliens relied mostly on strength, but humans had another advantage: the ability to think in unpredictable ways. The first challenge came quickly. A rock slide erupted ahead, triggered either by natural instability or the aliens watching him from above. Ethan reacted instantly, ducking behind a protruding boulder while the debris crashed around him. He noticed a small crevice between two cliffs just wide enough for him to slip through safely. The apex predator followed closely, its large body surprisingly agile as it navigated the narrow space. Once the immediate danger passed, Ethan took a moment to observe the gorge more carefully. He saw the paths that would be too dangerous, marked by loose stones or steep drops. He saw where predators might lie in wait, hidden by shadows or natural camouflage. Every detail mattered. The gorge was alive with dangers, and every choice could be the difference between survival and failure. Hours passed, and the challenges grew more complex. Ethan encountered a river of glowing liquid, which he quickly realized was highly corrosive. He found a nearby fallen branch and used it as a bridge, carefully testing each step before putting his full weight on it. Behind him, the apex predator followed without hesitation, using its claws to grip the rocks safely. Midway through the gorge, Ethan heard a low growl. A pack of smaller predators, sharp and fast, emerged from the shadows. Their teeth gleamed under the twin suns, and their eyes locked on him with hunger. Most humans would have panicked. Ethan stayed calm. He remembered the survival tactics he had practiced for years, patterns of movement predicting behavior, and using the environment to his advantage. He grabbed a handful of small stones and tossed them carefully, creating a distraction. As the predators moved to investigate the noise, Ethan slipped along the gorge wall, keeping low and using the shadows for cover. The predators snapped at the air where he had been, but the human had already moved several meters ahead. The apex predator growled softly, almost in approval. Ethan felt a surge of confidence. They were dangerous, but not unbeatable. Further along, the gorge narrowed to a tight canyon with walls that seemed to close in from both sides. Ethan could feel the weight of the towering cliffs pressing down on him. He noticed faint cracks in the rock and realized he could use them to climb higher, bypassing the treacherous floor below. Using his hands and feet, he scaled the rocks slowly and steadily. Every step required precision, but his human dexterity and intelligence gave him an edge over sheer brute force. Once at the top, Ethan paused to catch his breath and scan the terrain. The apex predator stood beside him, its enormous head lowered, sniffing the air for threats. Below, the gorge stretched farther than he had imagined, filled with jagged rocks, hidden predators, and dangerous drops. But he did not falter. He had survived this far because he remained calm, thought carefully, and respected the dangers rather than underestimating them. Suddenly, a massive shadow passed overhead. A flying predator, far larger than anything he had seen on Earth, swooped down toward him. Ethan instinctively dived behind a rocky outcrop. The predator's talons scraped the rock where he had just been standing. Ethan realized he needed a better strategy. He looked around and saw a narrow overhang above the gorge floor. Using a fallen tree trunk as a bridge, he carefully crossed to the other side, putting distance between himself and the predator. The apex predator behind him moved with surprising agility, positioning itself between Ethan and the flying threat. The predator leapt, snapping its jaws and claws, forcing the flying creature to retreat with a shriek. Ethan exhaled, realizing how lucky he was to have the creature as an ally. Its presence not only protected him but also forced the other predators to hesitate. As the day wore on, Ethan's muscles ached, but he refused to stop. He relied on his intelligence to navigate traps, predict predator movements, and find safe paths through the most dangerous sections. Every decision was deliberate, and every success strengthened his confidence. Even the mocking aliens observing from a distance began to whisper among themselves. How could such a fragile human survive in a world designed to crush anything smaller than them? Late in the afternoon, Ethan reached a particularly wide chasm. The only way across was a series of unstable rocks protruding from the canyon walls. A misstep would send him plummeting to the gorge floor. He paused, analyzing each rock's position, weight-bearing capacity, and distance from the next. Slowly, carefully, he hopped from rock to rock, testing each one before committing. Halfway across, a loose stone wobbled dangerously. Ethan froze, thinking quickly. He shifted his weight and grabbed a sturdy vine growing along the cliff, swinging to the next stable rock. The apex predator followed, using its immense strength to balance without falling. Both reached the other side safely. Ethan's heart pounded with adrenaline, but he smiled. This was what he had trained for, thinking when others relied on strength alone. As evening approached, the gorge opened into a wide, flat valley. Ethan looked back at the path he had taken, realizing how far he had come. He had survived rivers of corrosive liquid, packs of predators, rock slides, flying beasts, and narrow cliffs, all without the physical strength of the aliens. His human ingenuity and calm focus had carried him through. The apex predator nudged him gently, and Ethan understood the message. Trust and courage were more important than size or muscle. He knew the aliens would be watching his return, waiting to mock him or see him fail. But he also knew that what they were witnessing was something they could not ignore. Ethan stepped out of the gorge and into the open air. The aliens were there, scattered along the valley's edge. Some stepped forward, expecting him to stumble, to fall, to fail. But he did not. He walked steadily, the apex predator at his side, and held his head high. The aliens' laughter faltered. They whispered among themselves, unsure what to make of this human who had conquered challenges they assumed would destroy him. Varrock, the leader, stepped forward. His eyes were hard, but a spark of respect flickered within them. "Human, you have survived what few of us could endure," he said. Ethan nodded, not arrogant but calm. "I survived because I observed, learned, and adapted," he replied. "Strength is important, but it is not everything." The aliens exchanged glances. Some young hunters whispered excitedly, impressed by Ethan's intelligence and courage. The mocking was fading, replaced by curiosity and cautious respect. Ethan felt a quiet pride, knowing that he had not only survived but had begun to change how these powerful beings perceived humans. As the twin suns set, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, Ethan prepared to camp in the valley. He had survived the trial, but he knew this was only the beginning. The aliens would test him again, and the dangers of GalacticPrime were far from over. But he was ready. He had learned the value of observation, strategy, and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. The apex predator settled beside him, its massive form a constant reassurance. Ethan reached out, resting a hand on its scaled head. "Tomorrow will be another test," he said softly, "but we will face it together." The predator made a low, approving sound as if agreeing. For the first time on GalacticPrime, the fragile human had survived the impossible, and the aliens had begun to see that humans were not weak. They were something entirely different, something dangerous in ways the aliens had never considered. Ethan smiled to himself, feeling the thrill of triumph mixed with anticipation. The real challenges were yet to come. The following morning, GalacticPrime awoke under a violet sky, the twin suns casting long shadows across the valley. Ethan stretched and took a deep breath of the thin alien air. His muscles ached from the previous day's trial, but his mind was sharper than ever. Today would bring a new challenge, he could feel it. The apex predator, which he had come to think of as his silent guardian, stirred beside him, its large eyes scanning the horizon. Ethan moved cautiously, leaving the flat valley and venturing toward a dense forest of towering crystalline trees. These trees shimmered in the sunlight, their sharp edges reflecting the light like thousands of mirrors. It was said that few aliens dared enter this forest because of its confusing layout and the creatures that lurked within. Ethan's heart raced, but he knew that facing the unknown was necessary. Humans had always thrived where others hesitated. They relied on adaptability and curiosity, not sheer strength. As he entered the forest, the alien hunters from the valley observed from a distance. Some whispered among themselves, still unsure how to interpret the fragile human who had survived the Shadow Gorge. Varrock, the leader, watched closely, his expression unreadable. "He is clever," Varrock murmured to one of the younger hunters. "But cleverness alone will not keep him alive forever." The forest was alive with strange sounds. Sharp cracks echoed as branches swayed, and glowing insects darted among the crystalline leaves. Ethan advanced carefully, using his sensors to scan for predators and unstable terrain. He noticed that some of the trees had roots so strong they created natural barriers, while others formed hidden passages. Every step required careful thought. One wrong move could trigger a trap set by the forest itself. Suddenly, the air shifted. A low growl reverberated through the crystalline trunks, and Ethan froze. From the shadows emerged a pack of creatures unlike anything he had seen before. They were medium-sized predators, sleek and covered with reflective scales that camouflaged them perfectly among the trees. Their eyes glowed faintly, and they moved in perfect coordination, circling him like a hunting team. Ethan's heart raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. He knew panic could be fatal. Slowly, he backed toward a fallen tree that spanned a small ravine. Using his agility and intelligence, he balanced across the log, keeping low and steady. The predators followed, snapping and lunging, but their coordination slowed as the log wobbled. The apex predator arrived silently behind him, its massive form intimidating even to the cunning hunters. It let out a deep, resonant growl that made the pack hesitate. Ethan realized that the creature's presence alone had shifted the balance. He moved faster, leaping across the log and onto solid ground on the other side. The pack snarled in frustration but retreated temporarily, unwilling to challenge the apex predator directly. Ethan exhaled, feeling a rush of adrenaline. He knew this encounter had proven something important. Humans could survive through observation, adaptability, and courage. Even the alien hunters watching from afar would begin to notice that he was different. His survival was not due to raw power but to thinking ahead and using every resource wisely. As he continued through the forest, Ethan encountered another challenge, a deep chasm with smooth walls too high to climb and too wide to jump. He scanned the area and noticed a series of vines hanging from the upper edges. Carefully, he tested one, tugging to see if it would hold his weight. When it did, he used the vine to swing across the gap, landing safely on the other side. The apex predator followed, grasping the vines with incredible precision, and swung across with a strength and balance that amazed Ethan. Further into the forest, Ethan stumbled upon signs of a larger predator, massive claw marks on the crystalline trees, broken branches, and remnants of a recent hunt. He realized that he was entering the territory of the apex predator's rival, a creature even larger and more dangerous than the one that had accepted him. Every instinct told him to retreat, but retreat was not an option. Humans survived by confronting challenges with cleverness, not by running from them. The larger predator appeared suddenly, leaping from the shadows with terrifying speed. Its scales shimmered like molten metal, and its eyes burned with intelligence and aggression. Ethan's heart pounded. The alien hunters from the valley gasped in disbelief. They had never seen such a confrontation. But Ethan did not run. Instead, he observed, calculated, and acted with precision. He grabbed a handful of small stones and threw them toward a reflective tree trunk, creating flashes of light and sound to distract the predator. While it lunged toward the noise, he moved to higher ground, using the crystalline formations as cover. The apex predator, sensing the danger, charged at the rival, using its massive claws and teeth to drive the creature back. Ethan watched, fascinated and grateful as the predator protected him without hesitation. The two massive creatures clashed with earth-shaking force, and Ethan knew he had to act quickly. He noticed a narrow tunnel partially hidden by sharp crystal shards. Timing his movement with the predator's attack, he slipped into the tunnel, using its narrow width to his advantage. The rival predator could not follow easily, giving him time to escape deeper into the forest. Hours passed as Ethan navigated the labyrinthine forest. Every step required careful observation. Every choice demanded strategy. He moved quietly, avoided open spaces where predators might attack, and used natural barriers to hide when necessary. The apex predator stayed nearby, guiding him silently and intervening only when the threat was immediate. Their bond was growing. Ethan understood the creature's body language, its signals, and its quiet approval. By late afternoon, Ethan reached a plateau overlooking the forest. He paused to rest, surveying the dense canopy below. The alien hunters from the valley had followed him cautiously. Amazed that the fragile human had survived so long, some young aliens whispered excitedly, realizing that Ethan's intelligence and calm under pressure were unlike anything they had ever seen. Even Varrock, the leader, frowned thoughtfully, acknowledging that the human's success was not mere luck. Ethan knew the trial was not yet over. The forest was only the first part of a larger challenge designed to test strength, intelligence, and courage. He needed to prove that humans could endure in a world built for the strongest. As the twin suns dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the crystalline trees, Ethan prepared for the final section of the trial, a descent into a cavern rumored to be home to the fiercest predators on Zarath Prime. He gathered supplies, checking his sensors, and adjusted his suit to optimize mobility. The apex predator lay beside him, a silent reminder of the bond they had formed. Ethan patted its head gently. "We've come this far," he said softly. "Tomorrow will be harder, but we'll face it together." The predator let out a low, approving rumble. Night fell, and the forest transformed into a landscape of shifting shadows and eerie sounds. Ethan remained vigilant, knowing that even a moment's carelessness could be fatal. He slept lightly, with one eye open and one hand on his tools, ready to respond to any threat. The apex predator curled protectively around him, its presence a source of reassurance and strength. When dawn arrived, Ethan awoke ready for the final section of the trial. He descended into the cavern, the walls glistening with alien minerals that reflected the faint light from his suit. He moved carefully, noting every crevice and ledge, every potential hazard. The cavern was alive with the sounds of unseen predators, their movements echoing through the tunnels. Ethan's mind raced, devising strategies to navigate the cavern safely. The apex predator stayed close, responding instantly to any sign of danger. Together they moved through the labyrinth, avoiding traps and predators and using intelligence, speed, and careful observation to survive where others would have failed. Hours later, Ethan emerged from the cavern, exhausted but triumphant. The alien hunters who had watched from a distance approached cautiously. Some whispered in disbelief. Others nodded quietly in respect. Ethan had not only survived the Shadow Gorge and the crystalline forest, but had faced the deadliest predators of Zarath Prime and lived. Varrock, the leader, stepped forward. "Human, you have proven yourself in ways I did not expect," he said. Ethan nodded, keeping his expression calm. "I survived because I observed, learned, and adapted. Strength alone is not always enough," the young aliens whispered among themselves, inspired by Ethan's courage and intelligence. Even those who had mocked him before now regarded him with cautious respect. The apex predator stood proudly by Ethan's side, its presence a living symbol of his achievement. As the twin suns set, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold, Ethan knew that this trial had changed everything. The aliens had begun to see humans differently, not weak or fragile, but capable of surviving, adapting, and thriving in ways they had never imagined. Ethan looked at the apex predator, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and understanding. "We've survived together," he said softly, "and together we can face anything." The predator rumbled in agreement, and Ethan smiled, knowing that the challenges ahead would be difficult. But he was ready. For the first time on Zarath Prime, a fragile human had not only survived impossible dangers, but had begun to change the perception of an entire alien civilization. The true trials were only beginning, but Ethan was no longer just a human among giants. The morning air was crisp on Zarath Prime as Ethan awoke, the valley bathed in soft golden light from the twin suns. Today felt different. He could sense it in the stillness, the way the alien hunters moved, and the calm yet watchful presence of the apex predator at his side. The final trial, the culmination of everything he had faced, awaited him. Word had spread among the alien clans. The fragile human who had survived the Shadow Gorge, the crystalline forest and the cavernous trials, who had fought alongside the apex predator, and who had led alien hunters with intelligence and courage, was no longer a curiosity. He was now a symbol of human potential, but symbols were not enough. The ultimate challenge was to prove that humans could truly hold their own among the mightiest creatures on Zarath Prime. The leader, Varrock, approached Ethan. His towering frame seemed even larger in the morning light. "Human," he said, his deep voice resonating. "The final test is before you. Beyond the mountains lies the storm wastes, a region no alien has crossed without losing comrades. You must lead the hunters through it and return. Success will cement your place among us, not as a visitor, but as one of our own." Ethan nodded. He was ready. The storm wastes were legendary for their violent electrical storms, unstable terrain, and roaming predators of terrifying intelligence and strength. But he had faced impossible odds before, and he had learned to survive through observation, planning, and courage. The apex predator growled softly as if confirming their readiness. Together they set out. The journey began with careful steps across jagged terrain. The winds howled, whipping dust and shards of crystal into the air. Ethan adjusted his suit and sensors, scanning constantly for unstable ground or hidden threats. The alien hunters followed, some with doubt still lingering, but most with a growing respect. Ethan's calm and precise instructions allowed them to navigate the terrain without serious injury. Hours into the journey, the first storm struck. Lightning split the sky, hitting the jagged rock formations around them. The alien hunters froze in fear, some scrambling for cover. Ethan, however, stayed calm. He guided them toward natural shelters, pointing out safer routes and explaining how to move with the wind, how to avoid the unstable cliffs, and how to use their surroundings to their advantage. The apex predator stayed close, shielding the group from falling debris and attacking any smaller storm-born predators that came too near. Through his leadership, the hunters began to trust him fully. The fragile human who had once been mocked was now the center of their strategy. They moved in coordination, following his instructions as though they had trained with him for years. Lightning cracked across the horizon, but Ethan remained steady, thinking ahead for every possible danger. As they entered a narrow canyon, they faced the next challenge, a massive creature, covered in thick armor-like scales with claws capable of rending rock. It roared, shaking the walls of the canyon. The alien hunters readied their weapons, but Ethan quickly assessed the situation. Charging in blindly would be fatal. He signaled them to hold their positions. The apex predator moved forward, growling deeply, drawing the creature's attention. Using the distraction, Ethan identified a weak point in the creature's movement, a narrow ledge where it could not maneuver. He directed the hunters to flank carefully, using precise timing to avoid direct confrontation while still subduing the threat. The plan worked flawlessly. The massive creature was forced back, retreating into the shadows, and the hunters survived unscathed. Ethan's mind never stopped. He calculated each move, each risk, and each opportunity to turn danger into advantage. The alien hunters began to see not only his courage, but his unparalleled intelligence in critical moments. Even Varrock, who had been skeptical, could not hide the flicker of admiration in his eyes. Night fell over the storm wastes, but Ethan refused to stop. He set up a secure camp for the group, using natural formations and alien technology to create a safe perimeter. The apex predator settled beside him, vigilant as ever. Around the camp, the hunters rested, slowly beginning to understand that the human was not just clever, but essential to their survival. In the early hours of the next morning, the final test presented itself. A storm unlike any before descended upon them, a mix of lightning, howling winds, and dangerous predators taking advantage of the chaos. The alien hunters were panicked, unsure how to proceed. Ethan's voice cut through the noise. "Stay calm," he commanded. "Follow my lead. The only way to survive is through coordination and observation. Trust your senses, trust your instincts, and trust each other." With that, he led the group through the worst of the storm, choosing paths that minimized risk, timing movements to avoid lightning strikes, and guiding them around predators drawn by the chaos. The apex predator moved beside him constantly, taking the brunt of the attacks and clearing paths for the hunters to follow. Ethan's strategy relied not on brute force but on precision, observation, and intelligent action. By midday, the storm began to ease. The hunters had survived, and they looked at Ethan with awe. The fragile human who had been mocked, underestimated, and doubted had guided them through the most dangerous region on Zarath Prime, and they had all survived. Varrock approached once more, his eyes scanning Ethan and the apex predator. "Human," he said slowly, "you have done what no alien, no hunter, and no warrior could do alone. You have survived the Shadow Gorge, the crystalline forest, the cavern, and the storm wastes. You have led, protected, and outthought dangers that would have ended most lives. You have earned not only our respect but our recognition." Ethan nodded, feeling a mix of relief and pride. "Thank you," he said simply. "I survived because I observed, adapted, and worked with those around me. Courage alone is not enough. You need intelligence, patience, and trust," the alien hunters whispered among themselves, inspired by Ethan's words and actions. The apex predator let out a deep, resonant growl, almost as if emphasizing their shared bond. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a human who survived not by being the strongest, but by being the smartest, the calmest, and the most adaptable. As the twin suns began to set, painting the sky in vivid shades of red and violet, Ethan stood atop a rocky outcrop, the apex predator at his side. He looked down at the alien hunters, their expressions changed from doubt and mockery to respect and admiration. The fragile human was no longer just a curiosity. He was a leader, a strategist, and a symbol of the unexpected power of humanity. Borak stepped forward, kneeling slightly, a gesture of respect rarely given among their kind. "Human," he said, "you have proven that humans are more than they appear. You are not weak. You are not fragile. You are a force that deserves recognition and trust. From this day forward, your place among us is not temporary. It is permanent." Ethan felt a wave of emotion, but he stayed calm, letting the moment sink in. He looked at the apex predator, whose massive eyes reflected loyalty and understanding. Together they had faced impossible odds, survived the deadliest predators, and demonstrated that humans could thrive where others relied on strength alone. The alien hunters gathered around, some stepping closer, offering gestures of acceptance. The ones who had mocked him before now looked at him with awe. Young hunters whispered, inspired to learn from a species they had once thought fragile. Even the elders, long set in their ways, nodded with quiet acknowledgement. As the night deepened, Ethan sat beside the apex predator, looking at the stars above Zarath Prime. The trials were over, but the legacy he had created would remain. Humans, once underestimated, were now seen as capable, intelligent, and courageous. He had earned a place not by imitating strength, but by embracing the qualities that made his species unique. He spoke softly to the apex predator. "We've done it," he said. "We've shown them what humans can do, but this is just the beginning. There is still so much to learn, so much to explore, and so much to prove. Together, we can face anything." The predator rumbled in agreement, curling protectively beside him. The twin suns set completely, leaving the valley in the soft glow of alien moons. Ethan knew that he had not only survived but had changed perceptions, forged bonds, and left a lasting mark on Zarath Prime. The fragile human who had once been mocked was now a symbol of hope, intelligence, and courage, a reminder that strength was not always measured in muscle, but in mind, heart, and determination. As he drifted into a light sleep, Ethan felt confident that the next chapter of his journey on Zarath Prime would be filled with discovery, challenges, and victories. He had faced the impossible and triumphed. The aliens, the predators, and even the harsh environment had all acknowledged the truth. Humans were capable of greatness beyond imagination, and together he and the apex predator would continue to prove it. The fragile human had become legendary, and on Zarath Prime nothing would ever be the same. The stars above Earth twinkled quietly, but the calm of space was about to break. A distant blip appeared on the human monitoring systems, a fleet unlike anything humans had ever seen. Sleek, enormous ships moved with precision, radiating a strange energy that made sensors flicker. They were silent at first, but the presence was undeniable. No one on Earth had ever seen anything like this. The aliens were known in whispers across the galaxy as the Ascendants. Legends describe them as the strongest beings to ever exist, creatures who could destroy planets without hesitation, whose power made entire civilizations tremble. Even the most advanced species had learned to avoid them, and now they were heading toward humanity. At the International Space Command Station in low Earth orbit, alarms rang. Screens flashed images of the approaching fleet. Captain Elias Donovan, a seasoned human leader, leaned over the command table. His eyes were sharp, his mind already calculating possibilities. "They're coming closer," said Lieutenant Mara, pointing at the main screen. "Their trajectory, it's almost directly toward Earth." Elias's jaw tightened. He had studied alien threats for decades. "Most species would surrender," he said slowly. "Even our neighbors in the stars would give up before they reached us. But we're not most species," Mara frowned. "Do you really think humans can stand a chance against them?" Elias looked out of the station's viewport, his eyes tracing the tiny, distant ships that now loomed larger. "It's not strength that will save us," he said. "It's mind, courage, and the will to survive. If the Ascendants think we're weak, they've never met humans." Earth was on high alert. Governments scrambled military forces, launching research into new technologies and upgrading existing weapons. Scientists worked around the clock developing shields, energy pulse weapons, and faster-than-light detection systems. Every human on the planet felt the tension, fear mixed with a strange pride. There was something about humanity that refused to bow, Meanwhile, the Ascendants observed silently from their fleet. They could sense human activity but found it amusing. From their perspective, humans were small, fragile, and insignificant. Other species had tried to resist, and all had failed. Why would these humans be any different? Elias gathered a council of Earth's finest minds. Engineers, pilots, scientists, and strategists sat in the oval room. Maps and star charts projected in holographic displays. Our first priority, Elias began, is to understand them. Strength alone does not define their power. They've fought entire civilizations and won, but no creature, no matter how strong, can anticipate every decision humans make. Dr. Lila Tran, a leading xenobiologist, nodded. They operate on patterns. We've analyzed data from other encounters. They are precise, but they are predictable in their own way. We can use that, Elias's eyes sparkled. Exactly. We don't need to beat them in raw power. We need to be smarter, faster, and unpredictable. Every move we make can be a surprise. Humans have survived impossible odds before. We can do it again. Preparations were swift. Human engineers created agile ships, small and fast, capable of dodging attacks too powerful for conventional craft. Pilots trained relentlessly, learning maneuvers that would challenge every expectation the Ascendants had. Scientists developed energy shields that could bend light, creating illusions to confuse even the most advanced sensors. Months passed. The human fleet grew ready. They were no match for the Ascendants in strength, but humans had something far more dangerous to their enemies: ingenuity. The day of contact finally arrived. The Ascendants landed on a barren, neutral planet to issue their challenge. They declared that any species wishing to face them could do so, but all would be destroyed. Across the galaxy, other civilizations withdrew in fear, but not humans. Captain Elias stood on the command deck of the human flagship, intrepid, looking at the Ascendants' imposing fortress. It was enormous, a floating citadel of metal and energy that shimmered under the planet's sun. Their ships were elegant and terrifying. The humans aboard the Intrepid could feel the weight of history pressing down. They were about to face what no other species dared. Lieutenant Mara leaned over Elias's shoulder. "Do you think they'll take us seriously?" she asked, her voice quiet but tense. Elias smiled faintly. "They'll learn soon enough that humans are not to be underestimated." The human fleet moved forward, small ships darting like swallows against the vast backdrop of the Ascendant's ships. On the surface, the aliens watched them arrive, their massive forms towering over the landing area. Their presence alone was enough to make lesser species cower, but humans disembarked with confidence, their weapons ready, their minds sharp. For the first time, the Ascendants noticed something unusual. These humans, they didn't hesitate, they didn't beg or plead. They analyzed, they adapted, and they faced the impossible without fear. Elias led the first delegation, a team of humans equipped with the latest technology and armed with nothing but courage and cleverness. They approached the Ascendants' leaders, who regarded them with curiosity and amusement. "You are tiny," one of the Ascendants said, its voice echoing like rolling thunder. "You claim to face the strongest. Why do you not flee?" Elias stepped forward, standing tall despite the towering figure before him. "Because running will get us nowhere. We are humans. We face challenges no matter how impossible, and we learn, and we adapt." A murmur ran through the Ascendants' ranks. Never before had a species spoken to them without fear, without pleading for mercy. It was strange. The aliens conferred among themselves. Finally, one spoke again. "You wish to face us, very well. But know this, no being has ever defeated the strongest. You will not survive," Elias nodded. "Perhaps not. But if we fall, we will fall with honor. And maybe, just maybe, we will surprise you." The Ascendants laughed, a sound like metal grinding against metal. They were amused by the audacity, but amused was a dangerous thing. Underestimating humans had always been a fatal mistake. Back on Earth, people watched anxiously. The human fleet had entered the Ascendants' territory. The outcome was uncertain, but a spark had been lit. A spark of hope, courage, and determination. The human task force studied every detail of the Ascendants' stronghold from a distance. They noted patrol routes, energy patterns, and weak points in the massive fortress. Every night, Elias and his team ran simulations, testing new strategies, preparing for the impossible. "Remember," Elias said to his team, "strength alone doesn't win wars. Ingenuity, courage, and teamwork can defeat the mightiest. We are human. That is our greatest weapon. As the first night on the neutral planet fell, the stars above seemed to shine brighter. The humans slept little, but their minds were awake with plans and strategies. Somewhere far across the galaxy, the Ascendants were unaware that their overconfidence had already given humans an advantage. Humanity's story was about to change. The strongest in the galaxy had come to face them, and humans were ready to show that true strength is not always measured by power, but by heart, mind, and the will to survive. And so, the stage was set. The strongest beings the galaxy had ever known would soon learn a lesson they never expected. Humanity cannot be underestimated.